Ethan stared at the screen. Payment declined. He refreshed his banking app, hoping for a glitch, but the number stayed, $12.47. He realized that if he didn't change his daily actions immediately, his life would look exactly like this a decade from now. The same dim light, the same empty pizza boxes, and the same notification. It was a sharp contrast to his identity just 2 years ago. Ethan was the smart kid. He had the high GPA and the big dreams. He was the one who followed every instruction perfectly. This is the pipeline he was sold. High school leads to college, which leads to student loans, which eventually leads to a job. It is presented as a linear, frictionless path to a stable life. But the security of that path was an illusion. The costs, the rent, the tuition, the interest, were immediate and tangible. The rewards were still years away and entirely theoretical. While Ethan sat in lectures, he was bleeding capital. His basic survival, food and a roof over his head, required a constant stream of money he wasn't yet qualified to earn. This chart shows the velocity of his debt. Without a single dollar of income, the balance dropped rapidly, from $20,000 to $35,000, crossing the $52,000 mark. Then he saw his total student loan statement, $68,413. He looked at that number and realized he was already underwater before his career even began. He wondered how many years of his future life were already sold off just to pay for the chance to start at zero. The traditional academic model is structured to force students into a massive passive debt hole before they are ever trained to create a single dollar of active value. The next day, Ethan skipped his classes. He sat on a bench and watched people go about their lives, realizing he had been following a blueprint that didn't account for his current reality. He spent the afternoon researching how people actually made money outside of the traditional system. He found a chaotic world of dropshipping, content creation, and AI-driven services. He gravitated toward freelancing for one specific reason: it required no upfront capital. He couldn't afford to buy inventory or run ads. He only had his own time and the potential to build a skill. Transitioning to an open market is a massive leap. With $12 left, Ethan opened his laptop and entered the arena. This wasn't just a search for a side hustle. Ethan was testing whether he could survive as an active participant in the economy, rather than a passive consumer of education. In college, you get credit for showing up and turning in the work. The market, however, only cares about the result. If you have no marketable skills, the market treats you with total indifference. On day 1, 0 replies. On day 3, nothing changed. By day 7, still $0. This is the point where the structure of the old system looks most appealing. It's easier to go back to class and pretend the debt isn't growing than to face the silence of a market that doesn't want what you're selling. Ethan decided to increase his volume. This funnel tracks his output. By day 10, he sent 27 proposals. Every single one resulted in 0. Then, on day 15, a single response made it through. An offer for exactly $5. Ethan didn't hesitate. He spent 6 hours straight on that one task, obsessing over every detail to make sure the delivery was perfect. Economically, working 6 hours for $5 is a failure, but as a proof of concept, it changed everything. When the notification "payment received" finally hit his account, the psychological weight of his debt didn't vanish, but it shifted. This $5 payment was more significant than the $68,000 he had spent on school. The degree was a promise of future value. The $5 was an actual transaction in the present. This represents two systems. One is anchored by debt and time. The other, the $5, is a gear producing value independently. Executing this once proved it's a repeatable unit. Scaling requires clients and skills, but for the first time, he holds the lever. He began to suspect that the very institution he was paying $68,000 to attend might be structurally irrelevant to the life he actually wanted to build. The validation continued the next morning when the same client asked for 3 more projects. The $5 was now 15. The mechanism was working. Earning that first dollar is an essential realization. It's the moment the theoretical marketplace becomes a tangible reality. But while that first win is psychological, everything that follows is operational. There is a massive gap between earning a few dollars online and replacing a full-time salary. Most people assume the rest is easy, but this is actually where the most difficult work begins. Ethan had finally found the map to his freedom, but surviving the gravity of the old system long enough to actually reach the other side would be the hardest fight of his life.
You know, if you've ever found yourself sitting in a classroom or at a desk just wondering, is this it? Is this the only path for me? Then you really need to hear this story. It's about a student named Ethan and how a single tiny number in his bank account completely changed his life. This is it, $12.47. That was literally everything he had to his name. And, this wasn't just a low balance. This was a siren going off. It was the moment that really forced him to look at the terrifying reality of where he was headed. And that was his reaction. Not panic, not even anger, just this quiet, numb question. He wasn't just asking about why his pizza payment got declined. He was asking how the so-called smart kid, the one with the good grades and the big dreams, ended up completely broke and feeling utterly trapped. And this really shows you the disconnect, right? On one side, you've got the plan that we're all sold, the safe path. And on the other side, that was Ethan's actual reality. The two just didn't add up, and that gap between them was becoming impossible to ignore. And here's the big reason why. $68,413. That was the running total on his student loan account. Think about that. All that debt before he'd even earned a single paycheck from the career he was supposedly training for. This was the moment he seriously asked himself for the first time, what if this whole path is just wrong? So, what do you do when the plan just falls apart? Well, in this little moment of quiet rebellion, Ethan skipped a class, opened his laptop, and typed a phrase that would change absolutely everything: how to make money online. So he decided to try freelancing. It didn't require any investment, just skills he wasn't even sure he had. He set up an account, and he fired off 27 proposals into the void. And the result? 15 days of just absolute crushing silence. The self-doubt was so real, he was right on the edge of just quitting. And then this message came through. It was tiny, almost insulting, really. But after 2 weeks of nothing, it felt like a lifeline. It was a sign that somebody, somewhere out there, was actually on the other side. $5. It was never about the money, not at all. This was proof. It was the first little piece of real-world evidence that this other world, a world where he could create something and get paid for it directly, was actually real, and that he could access it. It was the power of just one small win. And, that little $5 success planted a seed. It was this radical, kind of dangerous thought that went against everything he'd been taught his whole life. What if this system, the one he was going thousands of dollars into debt for, wasn't the only way? But he didn't drop out. Not yet. Instead, he tried to live in two worlds at once. He was a college student by day and a freelancer grinding it out by night. And listen, it wasn't some overnight explosion of cash. No way. It was a slow, tough climb. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just piling up debt, he was actually building something. For the first time, he felt like he was in control. But as his new world started to grow, the old one began to push back, hard. The college, the very system he was trying to break free from, started closing in. There were warnings, the pressure of exams, and then the very real threat of suspension. The stakes were suddenly getting incredibly high. This became the battle inside his own head. The fear of failing at this new thing was huge, but it was clashing with an even bigger, more powerful fear. The regret of never even trying, of just staying on that safe path and wondering what if for the rest of his life. So he decided to push forward. And just when he was starting to find his rhythm, what felt like a huge opportunity popped up, a $200 project. It felt like his breakthrough, but it was a trap. He poured everything he had into it. We're talking 12 straight hours of work. He delivered it, feeling proud and totally exhausted. And then nothing. Silence. The client's account was gone. The payment never came. It all just vanished. After that scam, after all that work for absolutely nothing, the hope just fizzled out. And for the very first time, he said the words out loud, admitting to himself that this whole escape plan might have just been a really stupid mistake. And this was the perfect storm. At the exact moment his new path seemed to completely fall apart, the old one delivered its ultimatum, a final warning from the college. He was about to lose everything from both worlds, all at the same time. This was his rock bottom. He just sat there in silence for nearly an hour, totally defeated. And then he remembered that first $5. Not the money, but the feeling, the proof that it was possible. And right there, in that moment of total failure, he decided to give it one more try. But this time, he was going to be smarter about it. This was the big shift. He stopped chasing quick, easy money and started focusing on building real, valuable skills. He wasn't just trying to make money anymore. He was learning how to actually earn it. It was a total mindset change. And then at 2:13 in the morning one night, this notification popped up on his phone, $120. After weeks of just quietly focusing on his new strategy, this one felt completely different from any money he'd made before. And that's because this changed how he saw himself. You know, that first $5 felt like luck. This $120, this felt earned. It felt like real, sustainable progress. And the results really speak for themselves. His income didn't just recover, it accelerated like crazy. That $120 project turned into $300 projects, and then $700. He had finally cracked the code. He understood the game. He was winning. He was actually building his escape route. And then, in a single moment, none of it mattered anymore. A phone call from his mom brought his entire world to a sudden, screeching halt. And this is the question that his whole journey leads to. When faced with a real family crisis, the hustle, the escape plan, it all felt kind of meaningless. It forced him to ask a much deeper question. Was he actually building the right life, or was he just running away from the old one? And what was the point of it all, anyway?
Ethan stared at his phone. $12.47. The screen flashed a bright red payment declined notification. Just 2 years prior, Ethan was the top student in his high school with a straight path to success. He followed the blueprint his parents and teachers promised would lead to security. Get the grades, attend a prestigious college, and the degree will take care of the rest. This chart shows the reality of that blueprint. The baseline income remains flat at $0, while the red line of student debt climbs year after year, eventually reaching $68,413. Trading massive, compounding debt for the hope of a future career guarantees financial paralysis before you ever earn your first paycheck. The safe path is a mathematical trap. Ethan skipped his classes that morning, opened his laptop, and searched for ways to make money online. He settled on freelancing because it was the only option that required zero financial investment. For 15 days, he sent out 27 proposals to potential clients. No one replied. He sat in his dorm room doubting the entire experiment, wondering if he should just give up and go back to his lectures. Then, a single message arrived. Ethan spent 6 hours straight completing the project, and shortly after delivering it, received his very first payment of $5. That $5 was the first time Ethan generated value outside of a traditional system. It proved that the internet provided a direct link between skill and income, bypassing the need for a university's permission. Ethan's life became a grueling split routine. He attended morning college classes and worked freelance gigs deep into the night, often surviving on just 4 hours of sleep. The income grew slowly. Month 1 brought in $23. Month 2 reached $61. By month 3, he hit $310, a small sum that barely made a dent in his mounting debt. A client messaged him with an urgent $200 project. Ethan worked for 12 hours straight to meet the deadline. Upon delivery, the client deleted their account and vanished, scamming him out of the entire payment. That same morning, the college administration sent him a final warning. His attendance was critically low. If he missed one more class, he would be suspended. The financial loss and the academic threat hit him simultaneously. Chasing quick, low-level projects creates a high-risk cycle. You end up trading all your time for unreliable pay, leaving you vulnerable to every setback. Ethan decided to stop chasing random gigs and reset his strategy. He spent the next few weeks studying tutorials and learning how to solve specific, high-value problems for his clients. At 2:13 a.m., a notification for a $120 order appeared. This time, he didn't rush. He executed the work carefully, ensuring every detail was perfect before delivering it. The payment cleared without issue. For the first time, the money didn't feel like a lucky break. It felt like a repeatable result of his improved skills. This chart shows how his income began to scale. As his competence grew, his project values jumped from $120 to $300, and eventually to $700. Scaling your income requires moving past guesswork. You have to master a high-leverage skill that the market is actually willing to pay a premium for. A phone call from home changed everything. His father had suffered a heart attack. The doctors were clear. Any financial stress could trigger another emergency. In that hospital corridor, the freelance work became a survival imperative. Ethan could no longer treat his business as an experiment. It had to provide for his family. He pivoted to specialize entirely in copywriting, which allowed him to secure a consistent $2,000 monthly retainer from a startup founder. Professional acceleration often requires this kind of absolute necessity. It forces a ruthless focus on stability and high-value work, stripping away the distraction of smaller opportunities. While $2,000 a month provided safety, Ethan realized he was still trading his hours for a paycheck. His income had hit a mathematical ceiling he couldn't break on his own. Ethan reinvested profits to build a system. He developed digital products, online courses, and hired a team. After months of refining, the business scaled beyond his hours. His dashboard recorded a 30-day total of $102,784. Ethan visited his recovering father and told him the financial pressure was gone for good. He had built a reality that no longer depended on his father's health or his own physical labor. The traditional safe path is the slowest trap. True freedom is found by leaving that system behind to build scalable assets that work even when you don't.